Hi students, I am Bazi from Meslower Dizzy Classroom. In previous session, we discussed about how the structure of an ecosystem is categorized and how biotic and abiotic components are distributed. Now, how it works together and how they are interrelated with each other, how they are interacted with each other. If you see or if you observe in your school garden or any plant or a tree, especially in your garden, if you observe a grasshopper or a caterpillar which is eating a leaf and being eaten by a lizard or a sparrow and which is being eaten by a cat and which is being hunted by a dog. And in the same manner, if you observe on the walls of your classroom, a lizard may grab an insect. In the same manner, number of organisms depends on another organisms. In every condition, one organism is eaten or being eaten by others. The sequence of eating and being eaten by others in an ecosystem is known as food chain. A caterpillar eats the leaf, a sparrow eats the caterpillar, and the cat or lizard or hawk eats the sparrow. In the same manner, if you see the various types of examples, if you observe in a pond which is greenish color, we call it as phytoplankton or algae found on the surface of the pond, and these algae are eaten by certain minute insects or protozoans present in the pond. We call them as zooplankton, which are being eaten by a small fish, and that fish also eaten by a large fish, and those large fishes are eaten by human beings. If you see on a grassland, the goats or sheep which are grazing on grass, and that sheep also eaten by human beings. In the same way, if you observe in the same grassland, the grasses are eaten by a grasshopper, that grasshopper is eaten by a lizard or a frog which is being eaten by a snake, and the snake is eaten by a hawk or a eagle. In this manner, everywhere you may find one organism is eaten by another organism. In the same manner, in the forest, if you observe the deers which are hunted by lions, everywhere one organism is eaten by another organism. In this manner, the food is transmitted from one organism to another organism. But if you observe in the above examples, the same sequence is not followed in any ecosystem, because organisms have number of options to eat. If you see the lion in the forest, it has number of options to hunt. It may hunt on deer or it may be hunt sheep or a goat in a forest. In the same manner, the lizard have number of options to eat, and the cat also have the number of options, and a dog. Every organism have number of options to eat different types of organisms. They are linked by web of eating and being eaten, and this web we call as food web. In this manner, all the organisms, they depends on each other or directly or indirectly on plants. In every ecosystem, if you observe, the food chain starts from the green plants. You know, the plants are the major food suppliers on this planet. If they all die, what happens? The dead matter or all that matter is consumed by different types of microbes like bacteria, fungi, certain protozoans. You know, all these things are converted into simple inorganic form by the process called degradation. And in this manner, the simple inorganic forms again they are recycled and they are reabsorbed by plants in that ecosystem. In this manner, the energy and matter in an ecosystem is transferred from one organism to another organism in the form of food. Ultimately, the energy and matter recycled in an ecosystem. In this way, the energy and matter transfer from one organism to another organism in the form of food, and ultimately the matter recycled in an ecosystem. You know how energy transmits to entire ecosystem, and how many of us know that where does this energy come from? How the entire planet works like a giant ecosystem? You know on this planet how winds are generated and seasons are formed, how water from the sea converts into clouds and again it reaches to the rivers and the lands, and how plants prepare their food material, and how all these things are happens. Almost all the activities on the planet is controlled by these type of energies like light and gravity. For every action on this planet, all the activities are controlled by this energy, which is in the form of light and gravity. You know, the plants are doing their activity like photosynthesis by using this light energy. The light is the only resource of energy on this planet by which the plants are converting the light into food resources for entire planet. These food resources are further consumed by all the consumers like herbivores, carnivores, omnivores and different types of microbes. You know how much of sunlight is received by this planet Earth? You know, only 1/50 millionth of the solar energy is received by planet Earth, in which only 3 to 5% of light energy is consumed by all the green plants on this planet, and the rest of it is passes out as heat into the atmosphere. You know, in the process of photosynthesis, the total amount of light received by the plant, which is converted into food resources by a plant in the form of carbohydrates, we call it as the gross primary production. From this gross primary productivity, the plants are consumed some amount of energy for its metabolic activities like growth of the plant or transportation within the plant and transpiration, and different types of activities are done by the plants, and some of the energy is stored in the form of its body parts like leaves, fruits, roots, stem, etc. This type of stored energy we call it as net primary production. This stored form of net primary production is further consumed by all the consumers. You know, the plant eaters or veg eaters, we call them as herbivores. They are the only first consumers because they eat or they directly feeds on plant material, and we call them as primary consumers. All these primary consumers or herbivores, they consumes net primary production and they convert it into secondary production. We call it as gross secondary production, in which certain amount of energy is used for its metabolic activities like respiration, heart beating, excretion, circulation of their body, and the remaining amount of energy is stored in the form of muscles or meat, which we called as net secondary production. For example, if you grow a goat or a sheep, it feeds on plant material. That means it feeds on net primary production. After that eating, it enters into its digestive system and digests and assimilate into in its body. And 80% of the food is wasted as fecal matter or excreta. Only 20% is digested and mixed into the body, in which 10% of energy is used for its metabolic activity like respiration, heartbeat, circulation, etc. Whereas another 10% is stored in its muscles in the form of proteins which we eat. In this way, that energy is distributed, and this meat which we consumed is the net secondary production. At every level, this is transmitted and this is distributed like this. For example, if you take a food chain in forest ecosystem, if a rabbit feeds on a plant and that rabbit is hunted or eaten by any dogs, or the dogs are hunted or eaten by a lion, what happens at every level? Net primary production always come from herbivores, and after eating it becomes a net secondary production at every level. The energy is distributed and 80% of energy is wasted or dissipated into the surroundings. Only 10% of energy is consumed or assimilated into our body. And in this manner, energy flow from one organism to another organism, it is always unidirectional in the direction. In this manner, from the gross primary production, which is converted into net primary productions like fruits, nuts, seeds, roots and different body parts of the plants, which is consumed by herbivores, we call it as net secondary product like meat, and this meat is further consumed by another level of organisms. In this manner, energy is transmitted from one organism to another organism. The mangroves are the forest that grows backwaters of the sea at low depth areas of the seashores. They get nourishment from the both seawater as well as fresh water from the land. They are highly productive lands and they serve different types of feeding, nourishing and breeding grounds for many more organisms. If you observe the structure of the mangrove ecosystem, and they have biotic, abiotic and microbes. The abiotic factors like salt water from the tidal waves, fresh water from the terrestrial land, air, temperature, soil, etc. The biotic factors like the producers which produce the food by using light or chemicals, we call them as autotrophs, such as mangrove plants, phytoplanktons like Spirogyra, Euglena, Oscillatoria, blue-green algae, Eulothrix, etc. The consumers which feeds on producers like different types of zooplanktons, protozoans, Daphnia, brittleworts, tube worms, hydra, snails, mussels, shrimp, crabs, turtles and many more organisms we may find in the grounds of the mangrove ecosystem. And different types of decomposers, that is microbes, which decomposes the dead and decay organic matter, like mainly the bacteria. Almost they are thermophilic in nature. This is the structure of the mangrove ecosystem. Okay students, and We will meet again and discuss many more topics and many more interesting topics. Until then, bye bye.